Hello, Sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking the MLS regular season coming to a close, and then obviously moving on to the MLS playoffs, Champions League, and over there in Europe, the league wrap-up. We'll be talking about the U.S. men's national team roster that came out, and obviously the upcoming games that the U.S. men's national team have here in Europe over this next week. Netflix docs, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, November 9th, in the year that is 2020?
I am doing well. Now, Alexi, the last couple of weeks, I've used my allotted time in this opening segment to talk about Michigan football. I do have some television stuff I want to get in today, but I also don't want to be accused of ducking the subject. So can I sneak in a quick Michigan rant before we pivot to other things?
Absolutely. I mean, I am waiting with bated breath to hear what you have to say about your Wolverines and just the complete fiasco that is that team right now.
This is the low point since I started following Michigan football. At least when we had Rich Rodriguez or Brady Hoke, you could attribute the struggles to having a terrible coach, and you could convince yourself that if you ever brought in somebody like Jim Harbaugh, he would turn things around. And now we have Jim Harbaugh, and this is where we are. And Jim Harbaugh, in his first 5 seasons, despite falling well short of expectations, could at least hang his hat on the fact that he had made things significantly better than his predecessors. Anytime you suggested getting rid of Jim Harbaugh, somebody would invariably bring up, do you remember how bad things were under Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke? Do you want to go back to that? Well, we're there now. This feels like a Rich Rodriguez season. We're headed for 3-6, the kind of season you didn't think was possible with Jim Harbaugh. You thought at the very least he guaranteed a basic level of respectability, and he can't even do that anymore. So rant over.
Give me a coach out there that's the soccer equivalent of Jim Harbaugh. Who's the guy that coached Tottenham and then went over to Russia? The Portuguese guy.
André Villas-Boas.
is that a fair comparison or what? Give me somebody out there that you would say. I mean, is he a good coach? Or is he just not a good coach for Michigan right now?
Yeah, I mean, the resume says yes, but the past 5 years and change are the first time I've ever followed a Jim Harbaugh team closely enough, like every game, every play, the clock management, the use of timeouts, when to go for 2, the play calling, and all the rest. And I'm like scratching my head at how he's had success in these other places because it really has not been the experience I thought it would be having Jim Harbaugh as my head coach.
So the emperor has no clothes, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, if there are apt comparisons or parallels out there in the soccer world, please send us through. Who is your Jim Harbaugh in soccer out there? Okay. Have you watched anything interesting? I have, and I'll get your what you have watched here in a second or listened to if there is anything out there. I am in the midst of Who Killed Maria Marta? This is on Netflix. It's a 4-part documentary. 4 episodes, I think an hour each. And it's about the murder in 2002 of a Argentinian socialite. And it is subtitled. And here's the problem I have with subtitles. And it's a practical one. I mean, I have no problem reading them for the most part. But the problem is that when I'm watching things, I oftentimes am also doing crosswords. And obviously, you have to look at the screen to understand what's going on when there are subtitles, and so that's the problem that I have. Having said that, it's slow, but it's getting more interesting right now, and so I'm giving it a recommendation here. But I still have a long way to go. The other thing that I watched this week, and this is much more of a retro thing, is I watched St. Elmo's Fire. You ever seen this movie, Mosse?
I have not, actually.
Okay. So this is a typical and very popular 80s movie. It actually, in a wonderful way, illustrates what the 80s was, both the good and the bad, to be quite honest, and actually a whole lot more of the bad when it comes. It doesn't necessarily hold up. It's a Brat Pat type of movie. I watched the whole thing just because for nostalgia purposes, and I'm still going to watch it, but I don't think it holds up. I would not give this a recommendation. It's not one of those that I think you can show people that didn't go through that and didn't live in that time, that they will have any appreciation for it. And it has not it has not aged well, shall we say. So those are a couple of things that I have. Did you see or hear or watch anything?
Yes. Are you familiar with this Netflix show, The Queen's Gambit?
I have seen it advertised, but I have not looked into it yet.
It's been showered with praise. It has 100% Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm here to tell you the hype is real.
Really?
I loved it. I plowed through all 7 episodes in a couple days. I thought it was a masterpiece. Cannot recommend it enough.
Is it over and done? I mean,
it's over and done.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about next season. I don't have to worry about giving my time to the man or anything like that.
Correct. It's set in the Cold War era. It's about this girl, Elizabeth Harmon, who has a tragic childhood and ends up in an orphanage and discovers that she's a chess prodigy. And as she gets older, she becomes this world-famous chess player who travels around the globe and plays in tournaments against Russian masters, but still battling demons from her childhood and addictions and such. And it is so unbelievably compelling. I loved it. I cannot recommend it enough. Absolutely
that is a 2 thumbs up,
one of the best
100% rating. Yeah. That is a ringing endorsement.
I'm also watching this HBO show, The Undoing, with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant. I don't love it, but it's compelling enough. The 3rd episode aired last night, so recommend that as well. Next weekend, The Crown comes back, season 4. We're up to the 80s with Margaret Thatcher and Princess Di and all that, so looking forward to season 4 there, one of my favorite shows. But some bad news on the television front. David Fincher gave an interview recently in which he said there most likely will be no more seasons of Mindhunter, which is a Netflix show that's...
I know it.
Shows the last few years. You're aware of it. Yeah, I got our boss, Zach Kenworthy, into it too. He's devastated by this news. There have been 2 seasons of it, and it looks like that'll be it. It's based on a true story about this FBI unit that in the late 70s started conducting psychological studies on serial killers. Absolutely outstanding show. Very sad to see it end, but it appears that there will be no more seasons of it.
That was one of the first shows that I broke my cardinal rule and watched it with the knowledge that there potentially were going to be future episodes and seasons. But you're telling me that the director has said that's it, because they did leave it kind of open at the end there. So, okay, well, I mean, that's too bad because I really did enjoy it and it was really, really good. So, all right, but at least now I actually didn't break my cardinal rule in that it's done. So, all right, Mosse, enough about our viewing habits. You ready to light this candle?
Yep.
All right, let's start right off with MLS and decision day. As I mentioned, we're recording here on Monday, and yesterday was yet another decision day for Major League Soccer. A decision day, to be fair, unlike any that we have ever had in the previous 24 years. I love decision day. I love the excitement, the drama, the musical chairs that goes on, and there was plenty of that when it comes to the Eastern Conference. There were actual playoff spots that were up for grabs, and they came down, and we were going back and forth, and a goal was scored here, or a win, or a tie, and the point totals and the points per game totals were going up and down. In the Western Conference, the places had been decided, but where and who they were facing was yet to be decided. And Mosse, just a tip of the hat to you, my friend, for all of the help that you gave all of us in trying to navigate through all of the permutations out there when it comes to what was going on. It was fun. And as I said, I was on the set with Marisa Dew and Rob Stone, and then we had John Strong and Stuart Holden doing the actual game that we were doing on Fox, which was LAFC and Portland. And as the goals were coming in and the scores were coming in, Mosse and the crew behind the scenes were doing a wonderful job in making sure we understood what was going on. It made it that much more interesting, and the whole theater of it and the excitement and the twists and turns through the day were wonderful. Give the folks a little peek behind the curtain on decision day, Mosse, and what you and everybody in the control room were doing through the day.
No, yeah, I had the live standings up the whole time. I also had put together a little cheat sheet for myself going into the day of each team in the West, what their points per game would be if they won, drew, or lost their game. So in case the live standings crapped out or something, I could fall back on that and, okay, this team's winning, that means they're up to this, and that team's losing, so they leapfrog them. And so between those two things, I was okay. So yeah, it could have gotten very hairy there, but I think we were pretty much on top of things. Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into it, but there was one thing in particular that I thought was absolutely fascinating about this day, and this is where LAFC were going to end up. They could not have gotten a home game. Some people had that wrong going into the day. The fact that Minnesota and Dallas played each other meant that even if LAFC won their game, any result in the Minnesota-Dallas game would have at least one of those two teams ahead of LAFC. So LAFC were never going to get a home game out of this deal, but there was a question where they're going to finish 5th, 6th, 7th. And so they get the early goal from Vela. And so for a lot of the day, they were in 5th, and you thought, okay, so they're going to be going to Minnesota. Then Portland get that equalizer, Villafania. And so at one point you think, okay, LAFC dropped down to 6, so they're going to go to Portland in the first round. And then lo and behold, Colorado get a late winner against Houston. They leapfrog LAFC. LAFC end up dropping all the way down to 7th, which to me is one of the big stories of the day. And they are now going to Seattle in the first round for a rematch of last season's Western Conference Final. What a game that is, huh?
It's nuts. It's nuts. And like you said, it was constantly changing. And I don't know if you wonderful listeners and viewers out there saw the passive aggressive Mosse come out there right at the beginning where he just threw in there. If you blinked or turned, you would have missed it, where he said that people were missing a very important fact there. It drives Mosse and his ilk crazy when something like that happens, but they do pump out their chest, as they should, because Mosse had it right and he knew what was going on, even though others didn't. But you guys did a wonderful job for us. Okay, so first, before we get into the actual games for MLS playoffs here, a couple notes. Without a doubt, I think the biggest failures for the 2020 season are Los Angeles Galaxy and Atlanta. I mean, these are two super clubs that couldn't find a way through, albeit some strange circumstances and unprecedented circumstances, to figure out a way to be successful. And that's not acceptable in any way, shape, or form from these two super clubs. And so I'll be interested to see what they look like in 2021. Big winner, and it has to be said, is the Philadelphia Union. Congratulations, by the way, to the Philadelphia Union on winning the 2020 Supporters Shield. As I mentioned, with the unprecedented circumstances that exist in 2020, I think that this is forever going to be a unique and a special and, in many ways, a memorable award. And yes, for those of you out there asking, yes, it will have an asterisk, but the Philadelphia Union and the Philadelphia Union faithful won't, nor should they care, because a trophy is a trophy. And in a certain way, they should own that asterisk. And I mean, if they could put it on their jersey, I know you don't do it for Supporters Shield, but if they could, I would love to see that, because it is special. And the argument can be made that because of the fact that for many people, they believe that the obstacles and challenges that the Philadelphia Union went through, as did all the teams in 2020, makes it that much more special, and actually an even greater accomplishment than the other 24 Supporters Shield. And in that case, if you're making that case, which is a fair case to make, that asterisk can indicate how uniquely difficult it was relative to all the other Supporters Shields that have been won. But let's be honest, it is apples and oranges when you compare the other 24 years to this year. And that's why I say that asterisk is going to be there. But it's not to take anything away from what Philadelphia has done. It's just the reality of the situation in terms of the year that they did it. But we also know that even in normal times, winning the Supporters Shield does not in any way guarantee you success in the playoffs. The playoffs are coming, and they're upon us. Winter is coming, and this is a whole different ball game. And those teams, and there's only 7 of them, that are able to parlay their success in the regular season into success in the postseason, those are the truly great teams. Philadelphia, I think, has a chance, but I'd put your money on it, Mosse, but I wouldn't put my money on it right now. Anything about Philadelphia or things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this point. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks, but I am fascinated by this dynamic between the Supporter Shield and MLS Cup. And what I see now is essentially those two trophies competing with each other for importance. And so I want to read you a quote, a tweet from Matt Doyle, who is certainly one of the most respected MLS voices in this country. He tweeted right after yesterday's games, "The Supporter Shield is the best domestic trophy to win. It means you gave your fans months and months of great winning soccer. It's the best representation of who the best team in the league actually is. Congrats to the Union, deserved winners."
Okay, but nobody remembers it. They only remember who wins MLS Cup. That's the one where you actually do put a star on your jersey. That's the ultimate money shot. And while I agree with what he's saying in that over a length of time you have proven to be the best team, that's not what MLS ultimately is. So I get what he's saying, and to your point, we don't want to belabor this, but it doesn't mean that the praise shouldn't be given to teams that are successful in the regular season, like Philadelphia. And congratulations and praise to Jim Curtin. I think that there's a lot of us out there that are extra happy for someone like Jim Curtin for where he's come from as a player and what he has done as a coach. And by the way, done it for, while a big market, acting like a small market team. And to have that proof of concept come out in such a great way, I'm really happy for him. But the fanfare and the confetti and that moment of holding up the shield, which by the way wasn't the shield because the shield didn't arrive in Philadelphia, so it's a whole story. You should go check it out. It's so MLS, it's so soccer, it's so supporters in what happened with the shield. But that money shot of them holding it up, while that will be part of their history and as their first trophy that they have won in 2020, the real one is going, and the real confetti is going to be MLS Cup, which is going to come 33 days, I guess, from now, if we're counting. All right. How do we get? Oh, yeah, I got something to say, Mosse. I see the wheel spinning.
One underrated development in the East. Orlando going into the day had clinched a playoff berth, had clinched a home game, but they lost at home to Nashville and were leapfrogged by Columbus, who beat Atlanta. So Columbus moved up to third. Orlando dropped from third to fourth. And that means they will now play NYCFC in the first round rather than the Red Bulls. And with all due respect to the Red Bulls, I think there's a significant difference there. So that was not a great development for Orlando. They would have much rather had stayed in third. Do you agree that now they have to go play NYCFC, which finished the regular season red hot? So that is a very tough first round game for them.
Yeah, and to my point that MLS Cup is ultimately what matters the most. These games yesterday, they mattered. And I know, some teams had already locked up playoff position, and I also know that in 2020, we don't know the ultimate impact and importance of home field advantage, but that opponent that you play, what you did yesterday could ultimately come down to whether in 33 days you are holding MLS Cup or you're not, because either the opponent that you're playing, the travel that you had, the play-in game that you were in or not in, all of those different things matter. And so to your point, whether it's the LAFC moving up and down or Orlando having to play NYCFC as opposed to somebody else, this matters. And when all is said and done in 33 days, we might look back and say, had Orlando figured out a way to get points in that final game and get it done, that trajectory and that pathway, which is important, would have been completely different. The play-in games, by the way, and speaking of praise, congratulations to Nashville and Miami, both expansion teams that are actually going to face each other in the play-in round on November 20th. But they both make the playoffs, and I guess in your first year, making the playoffs is a sign of accomplishment. For depending on who you are, but certainly that's the first order of business if you are an expansion team. We've seen plenty of expansion teams that haven't done that, and so congratulations to them. What matchups stand out to you other than the Orlando NYCFC one?
In the East, we're talking.
You can go anywhere. I mean,
well, we should announce our first playoff game is one of the two play-in games, New England Montreal, which is a fascinating coaching matchup, Bruce Arena against Thierry Henry. And yeah, I mean, two really big names involved in MLS this season have been Thierry Henry as a coach and David Beckham as an owner. Both a little wobbly there for a while, but they end up getting in. Do you think in both cases, and we can veer more towards Henri here as we look ahead to our game. Do you think this validates this season as a success, just to make the playoffs? Or do you think they need to do something in the playoffs, or just getting in the play-in game in this expanded playoff to you is not enough to qualify the season?
Well, I mean, it was interesting. It was interesting because last night on the broadcast, we put up a tweet. I think it was from Inter Miami, kind of congratulating themselves and saying, against all odds, they come through. All right, first off, a lot of teams make the playoffs, and even more teams make the playoffs this year. And not all expansion teams are created equally. So what Nashville did relative to what Miami did, I'm much more impressed with what Nashville did than what Miami did. All right. This is David Beckham's Inter Miami. This is a team that, when it first came about, was supposed to be big, bold, super clubby, arrogant in a good way in the things that they did, and get people to turn their head, and not just scrape into the playoffs. And look, they might go on and win MLS Cup, which is fine. But to pat themselves on the back for coming against all odds, I mean, this is not the little engine that we're talking about here.
And the fact that they're playing the other expansion team in a play-in game could really undercut any kind of sense of accomplishment, because I'm sorry, if you just get the 10th spot out of 14 teams in the East and then lose to the other expansion team in a playoff game, and it makes it really hard to sell that this was some sort of successful season. If they went out in the playoffs to some established franchise, they could say, look, for an expansion team, we did well, we got in, and we need time to get to the level of the team that just beat us. But when you lose to the other expansion team, you kind of don't have that excuse.
And, we talked a little bit about it on air last night about this. The prevailing wisdom out there is that the Eastern Conference is stronger than the Western Conference. And I certainly can see the argument for that when you look at some of the teams. Obviously, the Supporters Shield winner, what Orlando has done, even sneaky good teams like NYCFC that we've talked about, Toronto. It's stocked over there. But when I look at the West side, don't sleep on the West, okay? And whether it's just the inherent success that we have seen, especially over the last 5 years, between Portland and Seattle, LAFC getting hot. I mean, we got Carlos Vela back on the field, and they're only going to get better. And they're going to certainly give Seattle a game up there. And even someone like San Jose, which we had written off. And Matias Almeida is, I don't know how many lives he has, but there was a time where we were talking about they got to get rid of him. And that he finds a way into not just the playoffs, but now he's in the scenario where his teams seem to relish and love, which is a tournament type of setting.
That's going to be a popular upset pick because they face Sporting KC in the 1-8 game in the West. And I think a lot of people think Sporting KC are a team that's not that great, that kind of overachieved to get that top spot in the West. And as you mentioned, San Jose feel like a very dangerous underdog going in there. And so there's a Sonics Nuggets 1994 NBA first round field. That's a very obscure NBA reference there, but I think NBA diehards will know what I'm talking about, that matchup. So wouldn't be surprised when people start making their predictions this week. More than you would expect might pick San Jose to knock off Sporting KC.
I would expect nothing less than an obscure NBA reference from you, my friend. That would be good. Some individual awards. Congratulations to Diego Rossi for being the Golden Boot winner. I did make my votes. I did vote for Diego Rossi for MVP. As you know, if you've been following me for any stretch of time, or if you're new, I will explain it to you. When it comes to the MVP, MLS does not give us any criteria, and so I get to make up my own, and I do each and every year, and it's really very simple. It's only about 4 different things. One, your team has to make the playoffs, especially in a year like this. If you don't make the playoffs, I don't care how good you are. It doesn't matter to me. You got to find a way to make the playoffs. 2, it's only goal scorers. There is nothing more valuable in the game than goal scoring, and therefore the only people that I can have as my MVP are goal scorers. 3, it's not about how many goals you score, okay? It's about how many different games that you actually score in. And because for me, if you are able to walk on the field and know that you are already, by the numbers, up 1-0, that is incredibly valuable to have. So when I put it all into my calculations, it is ultimately Diego Rossi. Now, Jassi Zardes had a real good call in terms of the numbers of games, but ultimately they were tied on numbers of games, and Diego Rossi played fewer games, and he was able to do it in fewer games. And so he just edged out in terms of my MVP voting, Gyasi Zardes. So congratulations to him. I don't know if he's going to win, but that's who I ultimately voted for. All right. Any other matchups or things you want to point to?
Is it still Paul Carr that helps you out with this MVP?
Yes, stuff? Yes. Each and every year, it's not Thanksgiving. It's just a fall tradition where, and he knows exactly what I'm saying. I don't even have to say anything. I just say, Paul, it's time, and he comes back with the numbers. It's very easy. Let me tell you
something. Paul Carr is a better man than I am, because the day that I am not professionally obligated to answer your questions, you think I'm answering that phone and looking up stats.
He gets a kick out of it. And even during the games, he was texting me as it went up and down. And when Gyasi Zardes scored, and then it was going on. And there was even an opportunity for Beric to be in play, except Chicago at the very end decided that they weren't going to make the playoffs. And so it doesn't work. If you're not in the playoffs, it doesn't happen. I don't know when those awards will be ultimately announced. All right, Mosse, anything else about these matchups?
Not about these matchups, but there is some breaking news. If I seem a little distracted right now, there's some breaking news that could impact MLS teams moving forward. A couple that you mentioned that missed the playoffs. Flamengo have just sacked Dom Torrent. They had an embarrassing 4-0 defeat to Atlético Mineiro this past weekend in the Brasileirão. And so I suspect Dom Torrent will be the new head coach of either Atlanta or the Galaxy. He's been mentioned for both. And the only impediment was that he was under contract with another team. Well, that is no longer the case. He is available. I'm texting with Ian Joy about it right now. Ian Joy obviously knows him well from covering NYCFC. And I expect him to be back in MLS next year. Like I said, coaching one of these teams that missed the playoffs. What do you make of that?
Are you calling it? You're calling it now, right?
Yeah, and I would lean Atlanta. It seems like they've been more heavily linked with him.
Interesting. I would disagree. I don't think that's.
Oh, really? You're not that high on him as a?
No, I think he's good. I just don't. I don't see it happening.
Doesn't move the needle for you. Like if one of those clubs announced tomorrow, Atlanta or the Galaxy, our new head coach is Dom Torrent, you'd be sort of nonplussed by that. It wouldn't be like a big time hire to you.
Doesn't mean he wouldn't be successful, but as far as sexy or interesting,
Interesting. The man was Pep Guardiola's right-hand man, Alexi.
Okay.
He drinks from that same fountain.
All right, if you say so. Look, I mean, it certainly, as I've said, for both of those jobs, I think they are still plum jobs, and they're going to have a lot of people, and that would be a wonderful type of candidate.
But yeah, to hop back to the playoffs for 1 second, we started with this. I want to bring it back around. Seattle LAFC is. I mean, you can't ask for more in the first round. So that's the matchup I have circled. Lots of other good games as well. But that one, I cannot wait. That is just going to be an incredible game. And I mean, if Seattle wins that game and LAFC crash out in the first round, I mean, does this just go down as a colossal failure of a season for them?
If Seattle is beaten by LAFC, yes.
No, if Seattle wins, LAFC crash out in the first round of the playoffs.
For LAFC, I don't think so. I mean, a year in which you had your MVP out the entire year. I don't think that they will look at it as no, I don't think they'll look at it as a colossal failure. A failure, yes, but I don't think a colossal failure to lose to Seattle, obviously on the road. But I said last night, my head tells me in terms of picking a winner through all of this, that it's going to be Seattle versus Toronto. Okay. I'm still not buying that Philadelphia is going to be able to parlay it into an MLS Cup. My heart tells me, and maybe a part of my head tells me, that crazy stuff happens, and it happens each and every year. It's the most difficult league in the world, I think, to predict, including in the playoffs. And so something like LAFC running the table over there, despite the seventh place coming out of the West, and someone like NYCFC coming out of the East. Now, would that be ridiculous? Not really, because it's MLS, but it's not safe money to do something like that. I don't know. What are you, when you look at this, if you had to go to Vegas right now and put it all down on one thing?
I still kind of like Seattle to win the whole thing. Is that a boring pick?
No, it's not boring at all. It's a good team.
Yeah, I mean,
they know what they're doing. Okay, as you mentioned, from a Fox perspective, we will have that play-in game. New England hosting Montreal, Bruce Arena versus Thierry Henry. That happens on November 20th. And then the winners of both the play-in games, so either New England and Montreal, or on the other side, as you mentioned, either Nashville or Miami, will then go into the Eastern Conference and play teams, and then go on there. They will either play Toronto, or
the way it works is the lowest seeded team to come out of these play-in games faces Philadelphia,
and then the next one faces Toronto. So Philadelphia and Toronto are waiting in the wings for who they are going to play, and then that all gets started on November 21st. So that's the day after they just go and they play the game the day after. Yeah, November 20th and then November 21st. You should have done better in the regular season.
I mean, I presume those games would not be the ones involving the play-in teams. I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at the schedule that carefully, but
we'll see. It's either November 21st, November 22nd, or November 20th.
Either way, it's a very quick turnaround.
It's a very quick turnaround. But you know what? Like I said, you should have done better in the regular season and positioned yourself better. Like who? Like the Philadelphia Union. Congratulations again to the Philadelphia Union and Jim Curtin and all the Philadelphia Union fans.
Does the name Roger Maris mean anything to you?
Roger Maris.
Yes.
He was a baseball player.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
For
the New York Yankees, in 1961, he broke Babe Ruth's single-season home run record, but he did it in a season in which there were 162 games played, as opposed to Babe Ruth did it when it was 154. And Major League Baseball very controversially decided that there should be an asterisk next to that record. They were very protective of the legacy of Babe Ruth, and Roger Maris was seen as sort of not a great enough player that's worthy of breaking that record. And so that's sort of the most famous asterisk in sports. And it's sort of in the years since, this whole concept of asterisks, I know it does have a negative connotation to it, Alexi. When you put an asterisk next to something, it sort of indicates you don't think it was done completely on the level. But you're, as far as the Philadelphia Union and their supporters should, you're sort of neutral about it. You think the asterisk here indicates just that this was an unusual season, but doesn't necessarily connote that it's less worthy of an achievement or more. It's just sort of neutral.
Exactly. But I think it is important, and maybe more so in baseball. I mean, there's no game that revolves around numbers more than baseball, right? So when you are comparing, I want people going forward to understand what they are ultimately comparing and what does make sense and what doesn't make sense, and not just say, well, this happened here, and so it's equal. No, it's not equal. It's okay. Now, you may argue that it's better, or you may argue that it's worse, but it's not equal relative to the other 24 seasons. And I know that there has been an unbalanced schedule. I know that there are things in every single season that you could say, well, this wasn't exactly right. But come on. Again, 2020 looks nothing like any of the other 24 seasons. And so when we are comparing going forward, I think it is completely fair to have that asterisk to remind people that this is what happened. And then you can decide for yourself how much or little credence to give it going forward. So that's what's going to happen. But you know what? Like I said, it's Philly. Philly doesn't care. They don't care what I think or anybody else. They're going to celebrate. They're going to have a good time, as they should. They're going to put that trophy in their cabinet. That's going to be part of their history. And by the way, the first one in their history. And they can live it up. And it doesn't really matter what I or anybody else say going forward. But when I'm comparing future accomplishments to what happened in 2020, that's why the asterisk is there for me, to let people understand what we are really comparing here and how it's important to understand that when you do that comparison. All right, Mosse, anything else?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a little break here. When we come back, real quick roundup of what's happened over the last week when it comes to Europe, both in Champions League and the club seasons that are continuing on. Don't go away. Moving on. Okay, welcome back. Real quick European roundup, if you will. Let's start, Mosse, with not specifics necessarily, but Champions League happened, as did the domestic game. Let's start with Champions League. Anything stand out to you with regards to what happened there?
Well, we're at the midway point of the group stage through 3 match days, and the biggest story is the specter of PSG crashing out on the group stage. They are now in 3rd place in their group behind Manchester United and Leipzig, who are each on 6 points. PSG is on 3. PSG lost on match day 3, 2-1 away to Leipzig. They played this game without Neymar, Mbappe, or Verratti. They actually took a 1-0 lead through Di Maria and had a penalty to go up 2-0, but Di Maria missed, and that was a turning point. Leipzig grew into the game. Nkunku equalized late in the half against his former team, and then a Forsberg penalty in the second half. It ends 2-1 Leipzig. The only thing I would say here is the first tiebreaker is head-to-head. These two teams meet again in Paris on match day 4. PSG could have Neymar, Mbappe, and Verratti back by then. Let's see if they win that game and by what score. And if they come out of this with the head-to-head, we might look back on this match day 3 game and feel like Leipzig didn't fully capitalize on the situation. You're facing this really understrength PSG team at home, and you had a man advantage for the last 20 minutes. Idrissa Gueye got sent off, and to quote-unquote only win 2-1, we might look back on that and think it wasn't that great a result. But nevertheless, that all presumes that PSG, first of all, are going to get all these guys back. And number 2, that they're going to be able to sort of rediscover their form here, because this has been a very awkward transition for them from last season to this season. They had a major COVID outbreak early on, now all these injuries, and you kind of feel like they haven't really gotten going yet this season, and they kind of have to now. They don't have a lot of margin for error in this group. Their next 2 games are home to Leipzig and away to Manchester United, and they need to get some points in those games. So, PSG crashing out on the group stage, that would be a debacle, huh?
Yes, that would be a debacle. That would definitely be considered a failure. You were asking earlier in the pod about if LAFC not beating Seattle would be considered a failure. Well, if PSG bombs out in the group stage, yes, that would be considered an incredible failure. Speaking of failing and or succeeding, I don't know. This United team, they what was it? 2-1 again. You got to pronounce this for me, Mosse.
Istanbul Başakşehir.
I love it. It's like music when you say it. So what's the deal with United, Mosse?
Well, they do the hard part, which is they win away to PSG match day 1. They thump Leipzig match day 2. And then they have 2 games in a row against Istanbul Başakşehir. And I said, okay, now all they have to do is take care of business in these 2 games and they're through. And of course they lose this one. So now that sort of keeps them sort of in the scrum. They haven't been able to separate themselves in this group as much as you thought they were going to after this match day. So yeah, I mean, United have just been all over the place this season. And this is further evidence of that. Yeah, terrible result for sure.
Let's jump around to some other things here. I think I've asked you this before. Are you still of the opinion that if you could only have one, you would have Lewandowski over Aaron Holland?
Yeah. Now, are we still in Champions League mode here?
Yeah.
We're going to transition to a game.
He scored 2, right? I mean, they beat up on Club Brugge and he scored 2, right?
Yeah. I mean, Holland is incredible. I mean, he continues to do his thing, but yeah, Lewandowski is off to a historically great start in the Bundesliga.
I just want to make sure as we continue to talk about Aaron Holland, whether it's domestically with what he's doing for Dortmund or in Champions League, that you are still not yet putting him on the level of Lewandowski.
For sure. And will be the best striker in the world for many, many years. I don't know if that baton has been completely passed.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I just want to know when that baton
Bayern, by the way, spare a thought for Jesse Marsch, who Salzburg faced Bayern. This game was close throughout. It was 3-2 late. You're thinking, boy, Salzburg really putting up a good fight. And then Bayern explode for 3 goals late, so it ends up being 6-2. It looks like it was a blowout, which it really wasn't. But that's just how explosive Bayern are. They can turn close games into blowouts in a blink of an eye. Yeah, I mean, as you navigate all these other groups, there's nothing all that surprising with the exception of Group B, and actually before the group stage, we identified Group B and Group H, the United Leipzig PSG group, as the most compelling, and it's kind of playing out that way. The big surprise in Group B is how good Gladbach have been. Frankly, they should be on 9 points right now because they surrendered a stoppage time equalizer to Inter on match day 1 and then a stoppage time equalizer to Real Madrid on match day 2. Then they go out and thump Shakhtar 6-0 in Ukraine match day 3. So if not for those 2 defensive lapses late, they could easily be on 9 points and in total command of this group. They are in first place of it. Real Madrid got a massive win match day 3. They beat Inter 3-2. They had jumped out 2-0 lead, Benzema and Sergio Ramos. Then Inter equalized with Lautaro and Perisic. And then Rodrigo, the young Brazilian, comes off the bench, gets a late winner, assist from Vinicius, a little Brazilian connection there. And that was a big, big result for Real Madrid. But they still have a lot of work in this group. This has been a very compelling group. And
then should we finish it up with Juventus? I mean, we almost got to talk about Juventus and Ronaldo back, and they were fine. I haven't read the article yet, but I just pinned it. There was somebody making the potential case that Ronaldo's time at Juventus has not been ultimately what it was set up to be. I don't know if you agree with that or not. And I know it's a much broader type of question going on, but at least he's back on the field. He's still incredible. And
I mean, if so, that's through no fault of his own. His numbers are outstanding. He just hasn't gotten enough help in these big Champions League knockout stage games. But I mean, that's. But
he's there to bring him to the promised land, right?
Yeah, I suppose, but I think that's harsh on him. I have to read the article and see what angle the guy's taking in making that statement. The other one last Champions League thing, which actually will segue nicely into talking about the Premier League. Liverpool, give them credit. They're making easy work out of a group that could have been tricky with Ajax and Atalanta. They match day 3 got a 5-0 away win over Atalanta. And we talked about the whole Jota Firmino thing last week. Jota gets the start in this game, scores a hat trick. And so there you go. I mean, it just sort of makes the situation even more complicated for Klopp. And he figured out an interesting way to handle it at the weekend in the Premier League.
Poor Klopp, poor Liverpool. Oh, I feel so bad.
But that was quite the result to Atalanta. They haven't been as great early on this season, but they're still a good enough team to go in there and win 5-0. That is nothing to sneeze at. So
it's Liverpool. It's Liverpool. Come on. All right, well,
that's all I got Champions League wise. If you want.
All right, so segue it into the weekend and Liverpool.
Well, so Liverpool were involved in the big game in the Premier League. They were away to Manchester City, and so coming off this Champions League game where Jota starts and gets a hat trick, you think, what is Klopp going to do here? Because he loves Firmino, and Firmino certainly banked a lot of currency with him over the years. He doesn't want to completely discard him, but it also would be ludicrous to not have Jota on the field as much as possible, given the scoring streak that he's on. So the solution that Klopp came up with in this game was to start essentially a 4-2-4 formation. He started both Jota and Firmino along with Salah and Mane. And it worked out relatively well. They put forth a decent performance, got a 1-1 draw away to Manchester City. Nothing wrong with that. But you wonder if long-term that can be the solution here. Eventually, he's going to have to pick between one of those two because, when they get healthier in the midfield and you have Thiago back and Keita along with Henderson, Wijnaldum, and Fabinho, though with Van Dijk out, Fabinho might spend most of the season at center back. But nevertheless, there's enough quality there that you're not going to want to leave too many of those midfielders off the team. So he's got to kind of figure this whole Jota Firmino thing out.
He is one of the greats because of his man management. All right, well, manage it. Figure it out, because you're going to have some people that aren't going to be happy. You're going to have some people that are going to be downright angry, and you're going to be going into a situation that you haven't had to deal with before. And so this is what he's paid for. I'll be interested to get your take, because over the last 24 hours, both Klopp and Pep Guardiola have come out talking about the 3 substitute situation that England decided to, I guess, return to for this season. Everybody else has kind of continued on with the COVID 5 substitution rule that a lot of people actually saw some benefits from, and a lot of leagues wanted to continue. The EPL, in their infinite wisdom, voted not to do that. And both Klopp and Pep have come out and said, we should have this. It's a necessity. It's something that protects our players. Now, is that true, or is it just because these are big clubs and they have incredible stockpiles of talent that actually it's an advantage to them to have that 5? Is that where this is really ultimately coming from?
No, I think they are genuinely concerned about the schedule and the injuries that you're seeing all over the league. And it's interesting that some of the clubs that voted against the 5 subs before the season have now changed their mind and said, if it was put to a vote again, we'd probably vote in favor of it. I was reading, there was a Premier League official who is in favor of the 5 subs who made an interesting point. He said, leagues that have a much bigger issue than the Premier League with competitive imbalance voted for it. So why is the Premier League, that of all the top European leagues, is probably the most competitive top to bottom. Why are they so worried about this issue of competitive imbalance? And he went on to say, there is an issue of competitive imbalance in European football, but it's a larger issue than 3 or 5 subs in a game. And if you're really that concerned about that, then we need to have much larger conversations about salary caps and all the rest. But to sort of, make
so
this.
Then why did they vote? So then why did they vote for it? I mean, is it just we're England and we're going to do things differently because you're not going to tell us how to do? I mean, there's got to be an element of that too, right?
Yeah, they're traditionalists at heart, and also you're right. They like to go their own way on things. And the way it was sold at the beginning of the season was it would be this huge competitive advantage for the bigger clubs, which at a time when there is this concern about how top heavy European leagues are becoming, we're going to create something else that's going to give an advantage to the bigger clubs. So that was sort of the sentiment of why they voted against it. But already a few weeks into the season, I knew you were going to bring this up because you had a infamous back and forth with Sid Lowe about this on Twitter. You're in favor of the 5 subs. He wanted to go back to 3. And I know you feel like you've won this debate because every other league kept the 5. And now even the one that didn't is sort of acknowledging they made a mistake and not doing so. Sid Lowe takes a big L on this one. Huh?
Mosse, it's not about winning and losing. All right. I want what's good for not just the game, Mosse, but good for humanity. Okay. That's all I want. Okay. Whether it's Sid Lowe or anybody else, I care about the humans involved in this. All right. So we're looking at an EPL right now where Leicester at 1, Spurs at 2, Liverpool at 3, Southampton at 4. I think there are very few people that would have predicted this type of top 4 on November 9th, 2020. Are we ultimately going to see a kind of strange and topsy-turvy EPL going forward here? Or is this just until things flush out and the cream does ultimately rise to the top? This is just what's going to happen for now on a temporary basis.
I think this is temporary and the cream will rise to the top. I still expect a more familiar looking top 4 by the end of the season, some combination of Liverpool, City, Chelsea, and Tottenham. The one club I'm really wondering about is Arsenal, who they had an embarrassing 3-0 defeat to Aston Villa at home. Aston Villa, by the way, this season already have a 7-2 win over Liverpool and now a 3-0 win over Arsenal. And look, here's the deal with Arteta. It's one thing if you establish your identity as being a team that for the most part is going to play proactive, expansive football. And then when you find yourself against Liverpool or City in a cup final, and in those instances you want to tweak it and be a little bit more reactive and play on the counter and come up with a smart game plan and get a result, then people are going to praise you for your adaptability. But the issue with Arteta is he's so far only shown an ability to do the second thing, and he's struggling to do the first part, which is to establish a sort of week out identity of playing expansive football. So the whole Arteta Arsenal thing is a little weird to figure out. He has some very impressive results, including one very recently. They just won away to Manchester United for the first time in many years. But I don't know, overall they're wallowing mid-table, and I don't think it's all come together that nicely yet. I mean,
nobody cares. Just win. Nobody cares. It's Arsenal. You got great hair, Arteta, but it doesn't matter. You got to win, and then you can talk about style and identity and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's keep going here. Over there in Germany, Der Klassiker. All right, you mentioned it. Bayern Munich coming away with a 3-2 victory over Dortmund. Is this just more of the same? And we'll talk about the cream rising to the top. Each year we get lulled in and lured in like the sirens singing from the Bundesliga. And then our hopes that somebody is actually going to challenge Bayern Munich, oftentimes in the form of Dortmund, are dashed on the rocks. Is this really what this result means?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but it's the same old story for Dortmund. It's a good team, fun team, but not quite good enough. And, little thing, but it's sort of a cliche to talk about, this is what champions do. But at late in the half, Dortmund score, Marco Reus to take the lead, and you think, okay, they're going to go into halftime with a 1-0 lead. And psychologically, that could be very significant. Bayern turn right around and get the equalizer. Last kick of the half, Alaba with that free kick. And now it's 1-1 and Dortmund are completely deflated. And then Lewandowski scores a go-ahead goal early in the second half. So, it's those last minute of the half, last couple minutes of the second half, those are the sort of goals that the true champions always find a way to sort of get that goal to change the whole direction of the match. Now, I do want to, this was a very interesting game from a VAR perspective because Robert Lewandowski had 2 goals wiped out for VAR offsides decisions, and one in each half. And I think this illustrated the real dilemma that we struggle with VAR, because the second one was one that, while close, was not millimetrically close. It was one that, even eyeballing it, you could say, oh yeah, he is half a yard offsides. And it was initially given. And had that goal in a pre-VAR world where that goal stood, Dortmund fans would have felt cheated there because he was clearly offsides. The first one that he had wiped away was more of the millimetric type that, man, eyeballing it, it looks like he's level. So in this sort of, in a pre-VAR, pre-lines world, I think that goal would have stood, and there's not a living soul in the world that would have complained that Dortmund got cheated, because just eyeballing that, it looked like he was level. And so there are people that say, well, kudos to VAR for wiping away the second goal, and that's what VAR is for, and that's what we want it for. But man, wiping away goals like the first one, that's when you're getting too crazy with it. And then there are people like you that shake your head like you're doing right now and say, no, once you go down this route, you can't sort of have it both ways. And then when we start drawing lines and having VAR, then you have to accept that both those goals are going to be wiped away. So I mean, that it was kind of an interesting illustration of this sort of larger dilemma we have when it comes to VAR.
Can't be a little pregnant. And you at some point in dealing with offside, somebody and some human being ultimately has to define and place a line. Okay. And so if you move that line, go ahead, but we're still arguing about that line. And so it won't change anything to move that line. I get it. It makes you feel better, but it doesn't change any of the situation that's going on. I mean, we have this conversation constantly. All right. Anything else Bundesliga wise?
Well, a couple of things. Reina started and I thought played well in this game.
Yep.
And also Joshua Kimmich, who I sang his praises last week, said he's one of the best players in the world. He got injured in this game, making a tackle on Holland. And I haven't seen the official diagnosis yet, but it sounded pretty serious. He could be out months. That would be a massive.
Didn't look good. It didn't look good at all. It didn't look good. Speaking of injuries, if we transition over to La Liga, Ansu Fati injured, and I think if I read meniscus tear, he's out for a long time now. That sucks for a young and obviously very talented player.
Terrible news for them. Yeah, he's one of the best young players in the world. I will say, though, and I don't want to express any happiness about a player getting injured. There is some Conrad de la Fuente implications here. The young American that is looking to get on the field for Barcelona, and Ansu Fati going down, maybe that opens the door a little bit for him. The stat that really jumped out at me from this game, Barcelona beat Betis 5-2. Messi came off the bench and scored 2 goals. And of all the Messi records, this one might be the most mind-boggling. He has scored more La Liga goals as a substitute than any other player in this century, 26, which when you're a guy that starts 99.9% of the games you play, the idea that you would be setting substitute goals records is pretty astonishing to me. But he even has those kinds of records too in La Liga. So
that's amazing. That is. I mean, oh my goodness. Is it Mosse, is it sacrilege to question or at least ask you how much of that is relative to him playing in La Liga? Okay, so the player that he is, and obviously for the team that he plays for, those records, would it be the same anywhere?
I think so. But
you think so?
Yeah, I mean, he's because he spent his whole, and I will say this season, the second of those 2 goals he scored was the first non-penalty kick goal he scored this season. His first 6 goals this season had all come via the penalty spot. He had yet to score a goal from the run of play. So I know, to borrow your phrase, I know it's sacrilege to ever criticize Messi, but that was something that was kind of, really, he hasn't scored a goal from the run of play. We're now several games into this season, and now he gets one, so he kind of puts that to rest. But so we'll see if this now kind of sets him on a path to getting his usual numbers. But that was a little bit of an interesting thing. A couple of other La Liga results I do want to headline. I've been singing his praises, so I want to do it again. Atletico Madrid beat Cadiz 4-0. João Felix with 2 more goals and an assist to Luis Suarez. He's been the best player in Spain this season. This is a star, guy becoming a star before our eyes. I mean, he's putting it all together. Like I said, even Simeone can't screw this up. This kid is so talented. So, I mean, just so much fun to watch right now. And then Real Madrid got drilled away to Valencia 4-1. No Casemiro or Hazard, who both tested positive for COVID. And the Casemiro absence was really felt. My dad always jokes that the key to Brazil winning any tournament is for us to somehow figure out a way to get through the obligatory Casemiro suspension game, because he always picks up enough yellow cards to get a yellow card accumulation suspension somewhere along the way. And you have to figure out a way to get through that game. And that's the importance he has for Brazil. And I think it's the importance he has for Real Madrid as well. It's a whole different team when they don't have him in the midfield. And you saw that again this weekend.
Well, your dad is a smart man. And so that's a look at the roundup with what happened. And Mosse, real quick, anything from Serie A?
Yes, there were some big games this weekend. Lazio and Juventus played to a 1-1 draw. Ronaldo gave Juventus the lead. And then Felipe Caicedo deep in stoppage time with an equalizer for Lazio. Lazio are a team that are dealing with this crazy controversy where they've been accused of falsifying COVID tests because they have guys that are testing negative in their tests that they conduct and then are testing positive in UEFA tests ahead of Champions League games. So they're having to explain themselves there. Atalanta and Inter played to a 1-1 draw. And then interesting, AC Milan coming off getting drilled by Lille in the Europa League 3-0. They fell 2-0 down against Verona. They come back to salvage a 2-2 draw. Zlatan scored a late equalizer, but Zlatan did miss a penalty in this game. He's missed 3 already this season. And it's becoming a bit of an awkward situation because nobody has the sort of courage to tell him that he needs to stop taking penalties. And so he's going to keep taking them, but this is like the one chink in his armor. He's not that good at taking penalties. And so keep an eye on that situation.
I can imagine the conversations in the locker room or in the coaching room. You tell him. I'm not going to tell him. You tell him. We'll go find somebody to tell him. They got to just go get somebody to tell him. Man, that requires a delicate type of conversation to be had. I will say Christian Pulisic is injured again. Nothing new, evergreen type of stuff. When we talk about Christian, we will talk more about Christian Pulisic and, more importantly, the U.S. men's national team as they get back together in our next segment, which is Ask Alexi. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Moving on. Okay, welcome back. It's that time again. Time for Ask Alexi. You use that hashtag Ask Alexi, and you send us on all the different social media platforms out there your questions, comments, and concerns. We pick a few of them each week, as we did this week, and we try to respond to them. All right, Mosse, what do the people want to know, or what do they want to say this week?
First up, at Evan Gavilio, what do you hope to learn from upcoming U.S. men's national team games?
Okay, so for those that don't know, the U.S. men's national team, for the first time since, January, February, certainly the beginning of the year, and a long time, is finally getting back together in the form of 2 games, one against Wales in the UK, and then one against Panama in Austria. Both of those games we will be televising, so both of those games we will be working over there on Fox, and we're really looking forward to see what this team looks like. And not just this team. I mean, this is almost all European based. There's one player in Sebastian Lletget who's from MLS. And the only reason that he is there is because his team is not in the playoffs, having him playing for the Los Angeles Galaxy. This is a roster that a lot of people are very, very excited for because of the undeniable talent, and more importantly, let's be honest, where that talent is playing. And a lot of that talent, it just hasn't played together. It still is a very inexperienced and young roster. A lot of players that have 0 caps, never even been, including some, I guess, what we would call big time players like Gio Reyna, never played for the national team. So as far as what do I hope to learn from these upcoming games, a couple things. One, what is the difference between the very impressive resumes and pedigrees on paper of these players as opposed to the reality when they get to the national team? What do they look like? Because we know it doesn't always translate. Now, you hedge your bets, and I do think a lot of these players are going to translate. But until we actually see them, and we haven't been able to see them, we got to be able to assess them. The other part of the equation is Greg Burhalter himself. We know that he came in with a expansive, romantic, progressive and very different type of approach, wanting this national team to do some things very, very differently. Well, what does that require? Well, it requires time, something that even in normal circumstances, you have very little of as a national team coach, and certainly much less so in that he's just lost an entire year. So does he change in every way? Does he become more pragmatic and realistic as he goes forward? As I said, time and time again, it's not about the best players. It's about the best collection of players. And this is the first look at this group of players with those great resumes and pedigrees in trying to define and decide who that group is going to be. Now, I mentioned the lack of MLS players. That was done by design. We asked Greg Burhalter about this on our broadcast this week. He was nice enough to come on this week to our MLS broadcast about this decision. And I really wanted to understand, because in this day and age where there are so many players playing overseas and at some very big clubs, and all of that attention and all of that opportunity that is afforded to them, and I think rightly so, what that says and how an MLS player should feel about giving himself the best possible chance of playing on the national team. Here's what I asked, and here's what Greg Burhalter said.
Greg, I know you talked a little bit about this, but what do you say to MLS players that are playing right now that see all the attention and opportunity to players that are playing overseas about their future playing for the national team? Do you have to play overseas in order to be considered for a Greg Burhalter national team?
No, you know that's not true, Lexi, and that's never been the case. You know, when you look at our squads, it's usually pretty well balanced. In this particular case, we opted not to take some core national team players that are going to be competing in the playoffs. And, you know, I appreciate firsthand what the coaches put into the season and how much time they dedicate, and to lose some of their star players for the playoffs, it just didn't feel right to me. So we left those players purposely off the roster, but it gave us at the same time the opportunity to look at some of these young talents. And we're excited to be working with them. We're excited about these two games. They're going to be two good tests and an opportunity for us to evaluate this young group.
All right, so I think that was important, and you know he has said this before, and I do believe that he recognizes that the MLS component, and I guess not even MLS, just the domestic component, because it certainly could include USL, is going to be an important part of this ultimate group. Now, what we're looking at here right now with this group that's going to play over these next couple of games. Look, take your pick on what you're excited to see. I mentioned in the previous segment, Christian Pulisic. We don't know if he's going to ultimately be on the field, but this should be nothing new to us. Greg Burhalter talked about him as if he could potentially play some part, but we don't know. But the likes of Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie on the field for the same time. I think Tyler Adams only played one game for Greg Burhalter. So this is all new. This is all good stuff. This is stuff to be excited about as we go forward. There are certainly players that are being looked at here for the sole reason that they are playing in Europe. There are certainly players here that won't factor in going forward. But it is a great opportunity for Greg Burhalter and his staff to see these players. And when it comes to certain players here, where we're talking about someone like Yunus Musa for Valencia, this is a feather in the cap for Greg Burhalter, for Brian McBride, and for Ernie Stewart, because ultimately it is a recruiting process. And when you have players that can play and are dual nationals, and sometimes more than dual nationals, that can play for multiple national teams, you got to be able to sell them on what you have going. And there's cases here where, at least initially, it looks good. It looks positive that they are considering the U.S. national team going forward. And we need all the help that we can get. Doesn't matter where it comes from. They're all Americans. And if they're good at soccer, we need to put them together and get that best collection of players right now. What stood out for you, Mosse, when it comes to this roster that's been put together for both the game against Wales and the game against Panama?
Well, a couple of things. I'll start where you just ended, talking about Yunus Musa and some other dual citizenship situations that are playing out right now. And you can kind of see it in the rhetoric of U.S. fans, sort of their growing confidence all of a sudden, because for the longest time, whenever the U.S. would fight for a player with against an elite soccer nation, one of the blue bloods, if you will, there was sort of this understanding that either he was going to choose the other nation based on prestige, or if he chose the U.S., it would merely be because he saw less competition there, more of an opportunity for playing time, and you're happy to get him, but you also understand it's a little bit of a backhanded compliment that he chose you. And now in some of these recent situations, U.S. fans are feeling like players are choosing the U.S. more because they see that the U.S. is building something special and there's this incredible future there and the potential for a lot of success in the next 2 or 3 cycles and World Cups and such. And so I just think it's interesting that the rhetoric has changed. In these dual citizenship debates, U.S. fans are now puffing their chest out a little bit more and saying, no, he chose us because he actually thinks we have more upside than you as a soccer nation, not because he thinks there's less competition with us. So I just find that to be kind of interesting. And yeah, you hit on the larger point here. Look, I think Greg Burhalter did the correct thing. I said a couple weeks ago, he shouldn't take any MLS player from a team that's going to the playoffs. On the day that he announced the list, Houston and Cincinnati were the only 2 teams that had been eliminated. He didn't want anybody from those teams, and so he made it all European based. And since then, Josh Sargent dropped out, and by then the Galaxy had been eliminated, so they were fair game, and so he takes Sebastian Lletget. So as far as the makeup of this squad, you can attribute it all to just the timing and the circumstance, and that's fair. But as you know, there is a faction of U.S. fans who look at a squad like this and think, this is the direction the U.S. needs to be moving towards anyway. And isn't it great that we now have enough players playing in the top leagues in Europe to put together a whole squad of them, and we don't have to bother with too many MLS players anymore? And so I know MLS folk are kind of sensitive to that. And I thought it was a great question you asked him. You phrased it a little bit provocatively, rabble-rouser that you are. But the larger point, it is sort of the issue that overhangs this list and all the analysis of it. So I thought it was a very fair question you asked him, and his answer was very interesting as well.
That was, and as will these games be interesting. But when we see the individual players and how they fit in, or maybe they don't fit in, and also, for this coaching staff to get to know some of these players. I mean, yes, some of them have been involved with the U.S. teams for the youth national teams, but until you actually get into that full national team and are living it and breathing it, you don't know. You don't know the personalities and what they're like off the field, and if they fit in, or are they introverts, are they extroverts, what their likes and dislikes are, how they react and play nice or don't play nice with others. All of that kind of stuff is important. The dynamics of a team are so important, and they do ultimately manifest in that 90 minutes. And so you got to be really careful, and you got to use every moment that you have at your disposal to figure that out. But look, there is no reason not to be excited, and really excited about the talent that the United States can assemble, whether it's the talent that's simply from Europe right now, or then augmented later on with MLS. These are, and this is, this is the crazy thing, Mosse. 3 years ago, I'd argue it was the darkest time in American soccer as it relates to the U.S. men's national team, the epic failure of not qualifying for 2018. And yet here we are 3 years later, and you could argue that this is the most optimistic and bright and exciting time that the United States soccer community has ever felt in regards to the U.S. men's national team program. It's amazing how it's changed. Now, once again, a lot of it is still on paper, and we know that the game is not played on paper. So we just hope that we are hedging our bets here, and that when it does happen, someone like Gio Reyna for the first time, that what we are seeing him do from a club level does translate, and he brings that and is as good and impactful on the U.S. national team, because that is what makes us better and gives us the better chance to get to that promised land of winning a World Cup. So I'll be really excited to see both of these games. And as I said, we will be broadcasting those. So we're looking forward to that. Anything more on the U.S. men's national team, Mosse?
No, that's
all
it.
right. What's next?
On next week's pod, we'll obviously break down both
Sure.
games. Next up, at the Smiths, 1986. What was the bigger signing for Spurs, Alex Morgan or Gareth Bale?
Well, it's Gareth Bale.
Sexist.
It's not. I know. Look, that's just reality. Okay, that has nothing to do with whether it's a male or a female player. It's just the reality of what Gareth Bale, the oxygen that he takes up versus the oxygen that Alex Morgan takes up. Now, both of them took their time getting on the field after the signing. But Alex, I think, stepped on the field this weekend, which was good to see. And we did see Gareth Bale not only step on the field, but get a goal. But it's this constant question and competition. I get it. I get what people want to do, and I get the question that you are asking. But yeah, I mean, it's still Gareth Bale. I mean, look, I am a huge proponent and supporter of women's soccer and making it better and having opportunities and shining light on the players and the teams and the leagues out there. But it still has a long way to go. Now, from an American perspective, because of what the U.S. women's national team is and what the U.S. women's national team players are, I mean, this was big news in the American soccer community because of, like I said, how important our U.S. women's national team is. But if you're talking worldwide, it's still Gareth Bale. So I don't think that that's anything surprising right there. If you're just talking about the U.S., I think you could probably make a case for Alex Morgan. What's next, Mosse?
And we'll end on this. This is kind of a throwback to the days when Alex Ad would try to pick a fun question to end on. At Sportsbook Tom, biggest flopper you played against are his initials LH, which I suspect he's referring to Luis Hernandez there. Is he the biggest flopper you played against?
Well, flopper, diver, cheater, whatever. I mean, I know these are all pejoratives that people throw out. Luis Hernandez, I don't look at him. Yeah, I mean, he was very theatrical, but so was someone like Carlos Ruiz. And, I know a lot of times it's, there are cultural differences in the way that we look at what is or isn't diving. I've always said, and I continue to say, it's really never bothered me that much. I know it drives some people nuts and they cannot watch the game, and it negatively impacts how they see a game when that type of stuff happens. I don't. I look at it, that theater and that performance as skills, as arts, and as something to be aware of going forward in any type of game situation that you are doing. But yeah, I mean, Carlos Ruiz was incredible. I mean, it was as if he got shot at times and numerous roles, not to the Neymar level, but yeah, I mean, those were some of them. But once again, I looked at it as an asset, and I know that sometimes makes people cringe. And as I said before, there are good, what word did he use? Floppers. There are good floppers and there are bad floppers, and not all flopping is created equally. And the panache that you use, and I guess it would be to some, the subterfuge that you use, and the way that you use your body and your mouth in terms of the audio part of it, all of that, it is a performance. And I can see value and appreciate, and ultimately, yes, respect when that performance is done well. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know who the biggest one. As a defender, you always feel aggrieved. And in the moment, you are angry and you are looking at the referee saying, how can you possibly be buying this? But what I was saying in that moment was, that's not a good flop. That's not a good dive. If somebody was really, really good, while it did hurt in the moment, there came a moment very quickly where I could appreciate what that person was done. And it's on me. And I looked at myself and said, I let myself get into that situation, and then that person recognized it and used it to create an incredible performance. I mean, but in your country, it's when I know your country is the U.S. too, but when it comes to Brazil, it's still Neymar right now. Is there anybody in the past that is tagged with the diver flopper type of moniker?
Man, not to the same degree. Yeah,
he's taken it to a whole nother level then.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say about Neymar and diving is in the first friendly that Brazil played post 2018 World Cup, they played against the United States, and there was a play in the first half in which DeAndre Yedlin fouled Neymar from behind pretty hard, actually. and then turned to the referee and said, "Did you watch the World Cup?" Which is a funny line, given that we were just coming off a World Cup in which Neymar had, done all this diving. But, I still come across every week on Twitter that clip, and they just show Yedlin mouthing that to the referee. Ha, 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 what a funny line. But what gets left out of that story is the fact that he actually did foul Neymar pretty hard in the play. And so it just speaks to the fact that if you're somebody like Neymar, you have to be careful that you get this reputation. And then even instances in which you are fouled, defenders are still going to sort of play on that reputation to try to argue to the referee that you're
Sure. But I mean, look, I can remember even way back in the 94 World Cup, I remember how the way that I approached a player dramatically changed the closer I got to the area. And I vividly remember slowing down and doing that checklist that happens very, very quickly in milliseconds of, if this was another 10 yards this way or that way, I would approach it differently. I would make that tackle. And I remember at times saying, live to fight another day. You don't need to do that. Don't get too close. Don't give them the opportunity. Don't give them, if you're really going to look at it, don't give them the stage and the spotlight to make what they're doing look good. And, I think that any good player or defender understands their opponents and understands their strengths and weaknesses. And if one of them is their ability to get into a situation and then flop, don't put yourself in that situation.
I don't know if this qualifies as diving or flopping, but I mean, probably the most embarrassing incident involving Brazil, now that you mentioned it, was in Brazil's opening match of the 2002 World Cup.
Oh yeah.
Against Turkey. The player kicked the ball at Rivaldo and it hit him in the knees, and he fell to the ground holding his face as if it had hit him in the face. And I remember the famous hockey analyst, is it Don Cherry? I think his name is. I remember him going on this rant about that, and it goes, "Rivaldo, more like revolting."
Well, in this day and age of VAR, I think it's curtailed a lot of the stuff, because you do, speaking of thinking twice, if you know that a play is going to be reviewed and there is going to be video evidence of what you're doing, if you're holding a piece of your body that wasn't hit or wasn't even affected, that's going to come out very, very quickly in the wash. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, I will give you my one for the road. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. We're finishing up the pod, as we do each and every time, with my one for the road. I had a real pleasure this past week of doing a special bonus edition of the State of the Union podcast, where I sat down with four young athletes, American soccer athletes that have been involved with the United States Soccer Federation. It is actually a group of five. I sat down with four of them, and they call themselves Next Gen United. And the reason that they have come together under this umbrella is to run for positions on the Athlete Counsel. What is the Athlete Counsel, you say? I know many of you know, but just a refresher, the Athlete Counsel is a 20-member group that by law, and the law mandates that they are given a voice and power in terms of governance over their governing body, which would be the United States Soccer Federation. They wield incredible power because they control 20% of that voice and vote. And actually next year, by the end of next year, it's going to be 33%. So it's only going to be even more power. And we often have seen this power, and it was it was on display the last presidential election for the United States Soccer Federation, in that they are often kingmakers, if you will, with that percentage, and they often vote in block, and so they have that power. Well, within that council, people are running for different positions in that 20-person council right now, and there's five of them, and I had the pleasure of speaking to four of them. Matt Freeze, who's with the Philadelphia Union, Smith Hunter, who's a young woman who is at Harvard, Mikey Lopez with USL with Birmingham Legion, Nick Mayhew, who is with the U.S. Paralympic team, and Brianna Pinto, who's at UNC. Now, all of these five have participated, as I said, at different levels of national teams for the United States Soccer Federation, and they all qualify. And there's a voting process, and athletes qualify to vote for these positions. I wanted to talk to them for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, because it's interesting, and I am I'm gratified and pleased when I see young American soccer people that want to pick up an oar, that want to do something off the field to better the game that we all know and love. That doesn't happen a lot. And when that happens, I do want to promote it and give them an opportunity and a platform. The other part of it is, and I mentioned this on the special podcast that we did with them, is that in the past I have looked at the possibility of running for positions when it comes to the United States Soccer Federation, and I am in the process of possibly considering to run for the vice president position for the United States Soccer Federation. For those that don't know, there is an election coming in February for both the presidency and the vice presidency. Now, these are volunteer, non-paid positions, and the vice presidency is open right now. The presidency is held right now by Cindy Cohn, and those will happen. And this Athlete Counsel will have a hand, as they always do, in selecting those positions. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. Ultimately, as I said, this is something that has nothing to do with my current job. I would continue to work at Fox if I were to ever do something like that, because I love what I do and I don't want to stop what I'm doing. It would just be an opportunity for me to be involved. And like I said, to pick up an oar and to do some things for the game that I love, that has given me so much, and for the United States Soccer Federation, which I think has a real role to play. And at times does it well, and at times doesn't do it well. But it was really interesting to talk to these young athletes about the way that they see this game. And look, I'm 50 years old. I have seen all sorts of stuff on and off the field in that 50 years. And I've been involved in soccer for many of those 50 years. And I've seen the good, bad, and ugly. And a lot of it is predominantly good. And a lot of that good rests in the incredible people that we have in the game. And for people like this group to step up. Now, they may or may not be elected, but this whole process for them, I think, will be beneficial. And they will learn things, they will meet different people, and they will be exposed to things that are important about their game. The game isn't just about kicking the ball. And by the way, the game isn't just about the national teams. I know we focus on national teams, men's and women's, and we talk so much about that. But U.S. soccer, and I'm saying U.S. soccer without the capitals of U.S. soccer, is so much more. U.S. soccer as the United States Soccer Federation is also so much more. And so anyway, it warms the cockles of my redheaded heart when I see people, and especially young people, that want to get involved like this. And so that's the reason why I did it. I urge you to go and check it out. You can first off find out about them on nextgenunited.org, but you can also find out about the Athlete Counsel that, as I said, is going through this election right now. And everybody that is running right now, either athletes that have been on this council that want to continue to do so, or other ones that aren't involved in this Next Gen United. And they're going to have to sell themselves and ultimately get the votes in order to be there. And when they do, then they will be in positions of power, and they will have that type of leverage to hopefully do some good things and to push our sport as it relates to the United States Soccer Federation in a more positive direction going forward. And so I wish all of them well, not just in the election, but going forward, because as I told them, this isn't just about leaders in soccer. This is ultimately about making leaders that are going to lead our country. I say each and every time, I still believe that I am incredibly privileged to be part of the greatest country in the world here in the United States, but we need leadership and we need leaders. And while we focus so much on making better soccer players, ultimately what we're doing is also making better leaders for our country. And the ones that want to step up and the ones that want to lead and want to learn and want to be exposed to things that have nothing necessarily directly related to them kicking the ball on the field, those are the ones that are not only going to lead us into a better soccer situation, but also a better country situation. And that's a good thing. So give them a little bit of your time if you do have that, and find out a little bit about the United States or the Athlete Counsel and the effect and the power that it has, because that voice for the athletes is important. as mandated by law. And it is important in terms of shaping what's going to happen with the future of soccer in this country, which we all want to be successful and to grow. Mosse, anything before we head off into the great unknown here?
That is it.
All right. Thank you so much for, as always, downloading and reviewing and subscribing and doing all of those different things out there. It means so much to us that you spend a little bit of time each week with us talking about this beautiful game. We will talk to you again at the same time next week. And until then, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.